on the meeting today, myself, Jeff Yates, head of commercial manager, heading up our Brexit Consortium, and our customs consortium, and Rob Price, who's been helping us, customs consultant on all things Brexit customs for the last couple of years. Very brief agenda. Yeah, key information for exporters, key information for importers, and 10 critical Brexit planning points for both importers and exporters. And as I said, we're just finishing off with our Q&A at the end. Okay, so, okay, start with exporters. So we're just going to be looking at the full loads here in this these few slides. So at the moment, it doesn't really matter which way. So you load a full load vehicle in the UK, it really doesn't matter what port that vehicle exits the UK from, what port in Europe it arrives to, or where it's going. It really doesn't matter at the moment. Come the 1st of January, just letting a few more people in. Come the 1st of January, it really does matter where you are, where you exit the UK, where you enter the EU, and where your final destination is, because that will govern what paperwork is needed and what document the driver needs to be able to exit. So there are two types of full loads now, effectively from the 1st of January. There's one where you enter the EU at the port in the country where the delivery will be made. So maybe you're shipping out of Felixstowe into Rotterdam and the delivery's into Amsterdam. So you stay in the country of the port of arrival, or you enter the EU, just letting more people in, you enter the EU in the port in a country that is different to the country of arrival. So you're shipping to Calais from Dover and you have a delivery in Milan. Two very distinct scenarios. So why is this important? This is important for this reason. So this is a screenshot of the web application drivers will need to log into come the 1st of January for full loads to exit the UK. They have to to get an access permit for them to be able to drive into Kent. Most vehicles shipping out of Dover, Calais, or on the Eurotunnel, they're going to have to log on to this this website and declare that they have one of these two documents in their hand. They either have to have an EU import declaration or a transit accompanying document, a TAD. And if they click yes, I have one of those documents, they get this nice green permit issued registration number, and as you can see here, they get a Kent access pass and they can proceed to the port of Dover. If they say I haven't got a EU import declaration or a transit document in hand, then they get a red message to say you can't leave where you are, you cannot drive to Kent to ship out. There is an amber status too if you're actually collecting this transit document en route to the port. I haven't put that one up, but it's just to show you really. So why is this important? So the driver needs one of two documents to exit the UK. He needs either a pre-lodged import declaration if he's sailing into the country where the delivery will take place, or he needs a transit accompanying document, a TAD, if he's sailing into a country that is different to the country of delivery. One of those two documents he's going to need. The problem is that if the commercial invoice or the data can't be generated prior to the collection, that's going to cause a major problem, and I'll explain why on the next slide. No, on the slide after. So this is just a slide I've used on a couple of times, and you'll be sick of these words by the end of this presentation. Trade isn't about goods, trade is about data. Goods sit in the warehouse until data moves them. Actually, goods sit in lorries also until data moves them. And in this example, it will be sitting in a lorry and be going nowhere unless the driver has one of these two documents. So we'll just firstly look at the pre-lodged import declaration. So again, I'll just reiterate, so this is like a full load export to Amsterdam. It's shipping Felixstowe to Rotterdam. So it is delivering into the country of the EU port of arrival. For that, the driver will need a pre-lodged import declaration in his hand before he leaves the UK loading point. And if that commercial invoice can only be generated after the vehicle's been loaded, It might take a few hours, because that's got to, don't forget, that invoice has got to be sent to Holland, to the importer, for the importer to send it to his customs agent, for his customs agent to make the declaration, to send it back to the EU, send it back to the Dutch importer, to send to the UK exporter, for him to print it off and give it to the driver. That is not going to happen in a few hours. That is probably going to happen the next day, but this driver is going to be at the port in 2 or 3 hours. So this is why we're saying that if you are delivering, if you have freight which is going to deliver into a country where the driver is shipping into directly, e.g. shipping into Dublin for delivery to Cork, shipping into Calais for delivery to Marseille, shipping into Rotterdam for delivery to Amsterdam, then ideally you need the commercial invoice 48 hours in advance, because we're relying on 2 parties in Europe to do something to enable you to give that document to the driver so he can exit the UK. The other example we talked about was transit. For those of you who don't know what transit is a customs procedure. So as soon as that vehicle enters Calais and it's on its way to Italy with £100,000 worth of goods, 20% of that, the VAT, is payable, and any duty is payable on entry to Calais, and on entry to France, and on entry to the EU. And a way to suspend that payment is to put the goods in transit, which suspends the VAT and duty until the driver arrives at an authorised site to discharge that transit in the country of delivery. But the driver actually needs a physical document, and that document can be given to him at the loading point if the loading point has authorised consignor status. If the loading point doesn't have authorised consignor status, the driver will have to leave the loading point and go to a government customs office or an authorised site to start transit, to collect that physical transit document. And also an interesting point on this, I had an email earlier this week that one of the biggest UK logistics companies is saying that if the loading point isn't authorised, then the driver has to deviate off his route on the way to Dover, for example. There'll be a £75 charge to send him into a government customs office to wait and pick up that document. And if the delivery point isn't an authorised consignee, in Italy, for example, there'll be another £75 charge because the driver has to go to another government customs office in Milan, for example, to discharge his transit document and wait probably in the queue. So, and that's on top of the price of the load. So this is something that we're going to have to get used to, and it's very important that if you can get yourself listed on someone's authorised consignor listing, you can start transit at your loading point and issue that document at the point of loading, and the driver is then border ready. We have an authorised consignor status, and all our export customers are on it. But getting back to this example, let's say the driver loads at 2 o'clock, he finishes at 5, he needs the transit document, but the commercial invoice can only be made available the next day. The driver is stuck then, basically. The driver is waiting overnight outside your premises for you to produce that commercial invoice at a charge probably in the region of £350 a day, because that's the normal 1 day's demurrage charge. So what we're saying is, goods are travelling under transit, we need a minimum of 24 hours before the collection date to make the export declaration and to make the transit declaration. So, if you can produce commercial invoices before loading, you haven't got anything to worry about. If you can't, you need to be thinking about a solution. And there are a few solutions that we've come up with for a couple of our customers that this is really affecting. It's sort of even worse when you've got a European express freight, when you've got a European express export shipment, because these shipments are very much last minute. You'll get a call at 2 o'clock, I need a van at 3 o'clock in Birmingham, it needs to be in Marseille tomorrow morning. So commercial invoices are not going to be ready because the Marseille customer has just placed the order, so there's a delay there. Perhaps the van might be loading late, and the finance department has gone home. How are you going to make the export declaration? How are you going to make the transit declaration if that happens? And also, if that delivery is for France, then you need to make a pre-lodge French import declaration. And if the commercial invoice isn't available, it's only available at 5 o'clock, that needs to go to France, to the importer. He needs to send it to their customs agency. They need to create the import declaration back to the French importer, back to the UK exporter to give to the driver. It isn't going to happen. So there's a real issue with express shipments. But there is a potential workaround for this pre-lodged import declaration, where you're sailing into the country or where the goods need to be delivered. And the reason, as I talked about this before, is that we're relying on 2 EU organisations to take action for you to be able to give a document to a driver so he can exit the UK. And that's okay if you're doing it in advance. But if you're not doing it in advance, you're trying to do that on the day and they don't do what they need to do, that driver is stuck at your premises on the clock, or he's stuck in Dover, or he's actually pulled and he's stuck in a lorry park in Ashford because he hasn't got the right documents. Actually, he shouldn't even be leading the loading place because he hasn't got his Kent access permit available. So a solution to this is, instead of issuing a pre-lodged import declaration, is to use transit. So this allows you to clear the goods inland. In France, for example, if you're sailing into Calais and you've got delivery into Marseille, you'd normally use a pre-lodged import declaration. But again, you're relying on 2 organisations to get that for you. So you could use transit, get someone to issue transit for you. It's quite quick to sort out. You don't need to rely on other people to do it. And the transit number, as I said there, will need to be communicated to the EU importer so that their customs broker can quote that number on the EU import declaration. Because when the driver arrives at the place to discharge the transit, perhaps a government customs office in Marseille, they will take the goods out of transit and they'll want to place it into another customs procedure. They want to place customs clearance will need to happen, but if the transit number isn't in the EU import declaration, there is nothing to trigger the EU import declaration. If it's there and it's in it, as soon as they close transit, that number will be quoted in the EU import declaration, and customs clearance will happen. The goods will be customs cleared. They'll enter into free circulation, and the driver can leave. So that's a potential solution to that problem. So not wanting to scare you. But if you've got groupage and part loads, you don't really need to worry about this pre-lodged import declaration or transit issue, because predominantly if you've got groupage or part loads, your goods are going to get collected by a UK driver on a milk run. He's going to be picking up goods and bringing them back to a warehouse in the UK to consolidate with other people's freight. But your goods will remain in that warehouse until the commercial invoices are made available. And one thing I think now, of very, very few logistics companies now will collect any freight from an exporter unless they've got the commercial invoice, because what they don't want is their invoices packed to the rafters of freight with no commercial invoices that cannot be loaded onto vehicles. So being able to produce the commercial invoice a day or 2 days before is vital. Trade isn't about goods, trade is about data. Data moves goods. So yeah, just to reiterate, this is a full load and express problem, because that driver is loading and he's going to be at the port in 2 or 3 hours. He's not going to sit in a depot for 6 or 7 hours while you sort the paperwork. He's driving to the port and you're on the clock. So no issues if you can get that declaration done the day before, the commercial invoice done the day before. And actually, us as a logistics company, we shouldn't even be sending a vehicle in to collect those goods until we've got permission to proceed from chief, and that is given once the export declaration is made. And that gives you the permission and us the permission to go and collect those goods and export them, and they are placed into export, the customs procedure export. So there's an elephant in the room. For those of you who are not familiar with the expression, what is the elephant in the room? It's a really, really big issue that nobody's talking about. And there is one, and I don't think many people in the certainly, hopefully, people in our trade, logistics, should know about it. But I'm fairly aware that a lot of exporters and importers don't know about it. And it is something called an entry summary declaration, or otherwise known as a safety and security declaration, otherwise known as an ENS. So what is this? This is just getting rid of something on my screen. This is a declaration that needs to be filed electronically into the import control system of the EU country of arrival, so that the customs in that country know what goods are arriving into their ports from third countries. Don't have to do it at the moment because we're not a third country. 1st of January, we're a third country. I'll explain a little bit more about this now. So this is so that the country that you're delivering, that the vehicle is arriving into, knows what's coming in. And they'll know it because something will be transmitted to them, which will have the commodity code on, and they'll know, okay, I don't like the look of that commodity code. As soon as the driver exits the ferry or the train, we're going to pull him over. And that's why they want this information before the vehicle arrives in their country. And why is it really important is that, well, actually, the HGV driver can't exit the UK unless the declaration's made. Who's responsible for making this declaration? Yeah, if it's a driver accompanied vehicle, it's the haulier. And if it's an unaccompanied vehicle, it's the ferry company. It's the active means of transport. That is the actual expression. So it's that, and a lot of vehicles that we're moving, freight we're moving, it's going on driver accompanied vehicles. So it will be the haulier that needs to make this safety and security declaration. When does it need to be made? If you're on the tunnel, it needs to be made an hour before you arrive in Calais. And if you're on a ferry, it needs to be made 2 hours before you arrive in the EU port of arrival. So why is this a problem? This is a problem because hauliers don't want to do this, because hauliers don't do customs in general. They don't want to make this declaration. They don't know how to make this declaration. They don't know where to start to make this declaration. And it is a big worry. I've spoken to a lot of EU hauliers and UK hauliers, and most of them are aware that they need to do this, but very few of them have a solution to it, which is why we're here at Espace. We've put a solution in place. We bought the software to make these declarations on their behalf, because we cannot afford for any hiccups on the 1st of January. So we'll be making these declarations for them into the port of arrival in the EU, just so that we're sure that everything will run smoothly. Okay, quickly looking at the current and the process at the moment for pre-Brexit and post-Brexit. So A to F is how it happens at the moment. You make something, you get an order, you book the transport, the guy delivers, the guy collects, the guy delivers, and you get paid for it. Really, really simple. Unfortunately, 1st of January, we've got 1 to 6 now to add into this flow chart. So you produce the goods, you receive an order. As soon as you receive an order, you need to make an export declaration. That export declaration, depending on what the order is, where it's going to, what port of arrival the vehicle is going, if it's a full load or a dedicated express shipment, that will govern. You might need a transit document. You will, no matter what type of shipment it is, an EU import entry will be needed. I've just talked about these safety and security declarations. They'll need to be made. The drivers will need to lodge movement reference numbers at ports. And of course, for every export, there is an import. The EU importer will have to have a mechanism to pay their VAT and duty. So what I've been seeing is actually now the haulier really just does D&E. We do D&E at the moment, or the haulier does. We collect and we deliver. But come the 1st of January, someone's got to do 1 to 6. And in my experience, hauliers direct don't know how to do 1 to 6. They just want to collect and deliver. And it's forwarders like us, or logistics companies, that actually manage the data and manage the borders. And that's going to be critical from the 1st of January. Trade isn't about goods, trade is about data. Goods sit in the warehouse or on trucks until data moves them. That is critical. Okay, so that was pretty much exporters. A few points on critical points for importers. Yeah, you have to decide now, how you're going to be making your UK import declarations. You've got 2 or 3 options, but I'll just put the 2 up on here. You can use the government easement for the first 6 months. You can defer your declarations for 6 months after the date of arrival of those goods in the UK by using EIDR CFSP. We have a spreadsheet which we've created for all our customers. They just keep a record of all the goods that are arriving to them from the EU. They send us that spreadsheet every 2 weeks or 4 weeks. We make the customs declarations for them, the supplementary declarations, and we send them back the entry number. We're advising customers to keep on top of this. Do not leave this for months and months, because duty could be racking up on that spreadsheet. So it's advisable to keep on top of it. Or you can make a full import declaration as the goods arrive. So those are your 2 options. You also need to work out how you're going to pay the UK import VAT. Are you going to defer it using postponed VAT accounting, or are you going to pay it on entry? You absolutely need to be applying for, if you've not got one, the new UK deferment account. The government have just opened this up, a deferment account without a bank guarantee. I think it's been 4 or 5 weeks now that this has been available. It's a complete no-brainer. Why wouldn't you have something which is free? It doesn't cost you anything and could save you money in the future, because if you have a deferment account, even a small one for £10,000 for duty, then you're not using somebody else's duty deferment account and paying charges to use it. So I strongly advise you, haven't got a duty deferment account. This is a very quick process. You get a very quick decision. And finally, on importers, you know, just as it's important for exporters to have commercial invoices 24 or 48 hours prior to the collection in the UK, it's equally important for your EU suppliers to be able to produce a commercial invoice. Because again, if it's groupage or part loads or full loads, companies aren't going to want to put vehicles in to collect those goods unless the export declaration has been made, or unless at least a commercial invoice is available, so that the export declaration can be made quickly. Okay. Okay, so
if I might just jump in there, sorry, Sally's just asked if the deferment account is for duty and VAT. This is just an easement for the EU, so it is only for duty. You can defer your VAT payments through your accounting. So you just have to make those instructions clear to your customs company.
Yeah, just make those in your clearance instructions to the broker that you want to use postponed VAT accounting, and they will make a particular entry. I think it's entry G in field. Can't remember what the field is now on the import declaration, which effectively allocates the VAT and what's the official word? It sort of allocates it to your EORI number, as opposed to payment. It sort of allocates it to your EORI number, which then sort of appears on your VAT quarterly bill. In the last webinar, there was a couple of slides on VAT and how it all works, and there was a long description of how it works. So I'll give you the link to that at the end of these slides. So 10 critical points for exporters and importers. First of all, can't keep saying it enough, make sure your invoices have the data on that you need. Again, all this information is available on our Brexit page. There's a commercial invoice on there with every piece of data that you need. And don't forget, your EU suppliers need to put the correct information on too, because we can't make the import declarations in the UK unless we've got the correct information. Critical, agree Incoterms now with your EU suppliers and customers. Avoid ex-works and DDP if you can. They are complicated. You do not want to be having Incoterms discussions on the Monday, the 4th of January. It will just slow everything down. Double check the commodity codes that your EU suppliers are putting on their invoices, and double check your commodity codes. So for export, you need an 8-digit code, and for imports, UK imports, we need a 10-digit code. And the commodity codes are the things that trigger duty. The incorrect commodity code could potentially trigger an incorrect rate of duty. And from the looks of it, it doesn't look as if we're going to get a free trade agreement. So it's critical that you check these commodity codes and make sure you're using the right ones. CPC codes are customs procedural codes. So understand what they are. Most people are going to be exporting on a permanent basis to the EU. And most people are going to be importing on a permanent basis their goods into the UK. But you know, if you're sending goods out to the EU for repair or a long-term loan, it's not a permanent export, or if that's coming back the other way, it's not a permanent import. So you'll be using a different CPC code on the import or the export declaration. So just be aware that if it's not a permanent import or export, it needs to be something different, and you need to be advising your customs broker of the CPC code. A list of those again was on the exporters webinar, I believe. Yeah, check what duty is going to be applied to your EU exports and your EU imports. Again, if we don't reach a free trade deal. Yeah, make sure that your haulers and logistics companies can not only move your freight, but manage the borders it crosses. Absolutely critical. You do not want to be using people from the 1st of January that can't manage the borders, can't do the customs, because everything will grind to a halt for you. Yeah, and appoint a customs agent to handle your declarations and authorise them to do so in writing. You'll need to get some text from them, which you put onto your letterhead and sign it, and that gives them direct authorisation to do customs declarations for you. They shouldn't be doing any customs declarations for you, customs agents, without authorisation from you in writing. Talked about it before. Make sure that you have the data, you have commercial invoices available 24 to 48 hours prior to the loading date. If that's a problem for you, and it is a problem for many people, just ping us an email. I'll give you the address later, and we can talk about some potential workarounds on that we're looking at with a couple of other customers at the moment. Yeah, alternative modes of transport. It's very likely that Kent will become a lorry park very, very quickly. So have you spoken to your logistics companies about other ports, other modes of transport to get your goods out of the UK or into the UK, which avoids Kent? It's a conversation I've been having with a number of our customers, and you know, it is going to be carnage, unfortunately, I think, in January. So make sure if you're a UK importer, you've got enough stock. Get those orders placed now and get them into the UK prior to the end of the year. And you know, I'm sure I've seen it. We've seen huge increases in imports and exports over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Make sure your EU suppliers have enough stock, because we don't know where we're going to be in January. So yes, you can only control what you can control. So you know, the problems in Kent we can't do anything about. But there are things that we can do. You just need to educate yourself. You can start looking at alternative modes of transport. Just being educated and knowing, having a better understanding of Brexit customs has got to be an advisable thing to do. So we produced this 24-page guide. We've already sent 300 of those out. I think we've only got about 10 left now, if that. That guide, actually, you can download that guide from our Brexit webpage. And on that Brexit webpage there, all the previous webinars, the exporters webinar, the importers webinar, all the slides are all made available, and lots of other useful downloads are on there. Commercial invoice downloads, VAT accounting, transit is all explained on our webpage. If you've got a question, anything to do with Brexit or this meeting today, just ping it over to Brexit@, and we'll address that for you. So yes, of course, we have a solution to Brexit customs. It's our Espace Customs Consortium. That's the website for it, and an email address. So if you're interested in joining that, it's just over £1 a day to join, and it gets you discounted customs fees. And Rob Price from Clearlight Customs, if you have any specific customs queries, he's a very, very busy man with his business partner Helen at the moment. He still has his introductory offer on of £99 for an hour's worth of advice. So that's the presentation now, and we'll just move on to the Q&A. So if you have got a question, I'll just perhaps stop this share now. Wow, lots of people. We will I'll hand you over to Jeff. You've got access to the chat, haven't you, Jeff?
Thank you. I'd say there's a couple here. Rob, I'll have to lean on you for this one. I'm hearing that aggregation under EIDR supplementary decks only allows up to 10 days movements to be aggregated. So essentially 3 supplementary declarations a month. Can you fill us in any further on there, please?
Good one to pick for me, thank you.
That's a pretty
I do not know the answer. I don't happen to have worked recently on aggregation of subdecks. It's something that perhaps if the person asking wants to drop you a line, Jeff, on email,
okay.
I'm happy to provide a contact in HMRC who I know is a specialist in that area. So if that would help, but as a good starter for 10, I do not know the answer to that one straight off. Sorry.
Super. Okay, no problem. Darren, on the chat, there's my email address there. If you could drop me a line on there, I'd appreciate that. In case of an error of a TAD or an export declaration, what's going to happen to the driver at the port of exit of the UK?
Is that one for me, Jeff, as well?
Tony, Rob?
Yeah. When you create a TAD, you do it through a piece of software. You can't get a valid movement without having a correct set of data. That's the first point.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be moving to the port without a valid TAD. Beyond that, there is a possibility that customs could raise a query, but it is, in practice, highly unlikely, I would say, and certainly in the first period of next year. If you are moving your truck with a valid TAD, then it should be relatively seamless at the borders. So the key control point really is providing sufficient and accurate data for your broker or whoever is creating the TAD in order to get a valid response, because the control actually happens during the submission of the data, not when you get to the port necessarily. Mm-hmm. Unless you want to add anything, Tony, to that.
No. I took the words out of my mouth.
Rob, just another from me, if I may. If they've got an 8-digit commodity code which we need for exports. If we need to have a 10-digit code for imports, but we can only find an 8-digit code, how do you make that into a 10-digit code?
So normally the UK trade tariff is the place to start. So that's a search website run by HMRC. So the 8 digits will typically only be a subset of the 10. So you can put the 8 digits in, and then if you follow through, you can find the last 2 by searching within the trade tariff. So it won't be a totally different set of 10 numbers. The first 8 will be the same, and then you can add the second 2. So it'll end 00, 10, 90, etc. But you just need to, I would recommend the quickest way is put the first 8 into the search engine, which is the trade tariff, and then you can it'll show you the first 8, and you can expand it to show you the last 2 for import.
Okay, super. I hope that works for you, Amelia. If there's anybody else, there's no more questions on the chat. If anybody wants to ask any live questions, please do.
There's a question that came in before the meeting, and it's one I think Rob's been looking at with Jeff regarding waste. So waste and scraps. I haven't written the question down, but it was a question regarding I think we was importing or exporting some waste or some scrap or some goods under warranty. They've got no value. What value do I put on my commercial invoice?
Yeah, just to dip in there. So there's a couple of things with waste and scrap. So the first one I would just urge, it's not directly a customs matter, but is to make sure you've got the appropriate waste disposal licenses before you ship that type of item. But that is certainly not my area of expertise. Yeah. In terms of valuation, then it is quite a thorny area because customs view is everything has a value. So you're going to have to establish a value from some process internally for the waste. There are formalized sets of methods to value goods. And anybody who's interested in pursuing that, it's HMRC Notice 252, which is a rather lengthy read, but in short, what it says is you start with a valuation of goods based on the commercial value, namely the invoice value of the goods. But from experience when dealing with waste processors, they often say, well, actually, I'm not selling the goods. I'm moving them free of charge to be disposed of. So if you work through that public notice, you end up in a situation often where you have to go to HMRC to agree a valuation method. which you would propose. So it could be something like a price per kilo, and there's various ways you can do that. But in the end, from experience, it's important to get that right at the outset. Otherwise, it's going to come back to bite you in the long run when those goods arrive at the destination, when destination customs want to know how you valued your scrap. So Notice 252 is the starting place for valuation.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Couple coming in now, if I may. Chap here, he's shipping out DDP to Southern Ireland. Do we need a Southern Ireland VAT and EORI number, even though we don't have a company based there? And how would you go about obtaining them if they do?
So if it is pure DDP, as everybody intends, following the Incoterm rules, then the GB exporter in that case would also be the Irish importer, and therefore you will need to use someone's EU EORI, presumably your own, to get registered. The Ireland process, which we've been using, and I know Tony's also used, is a manual request by email to Irish Revenue to allocate you a non-Irish entity EU VAT number. Taking a couple of weeks, Tony, I think, from your experience to get those through.
Yeah, a couple of weeks, bit of pushing to Irish Customs to get our. So we now have an EU EORI number, which was registered in Ireland, and it was free. So, and we needed that to make these safety and security declarations for our hauliers.
So one thing perhaps I would add, I think Tony's got a service partner as well who are offering EORI registration services. So for that particular client, it's probably worth taking professional advice on the implications of holding an EU entity and an EU EORI. And I'm sure Tony can put you in touch with his partner who does that.
Anyone just send me an email at brexit@spaceglobalfreight.com. Happy to help.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I just clarify that? Does that mean that we would have to be VAT registered in Ireland?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
So you could choose to be. So our business, we apply to say we are literally an intermediary. We have no entity, we have no VAT presence over there. And that is quite a manual process on email. It's quite simple, but it's manual. But I would just caveat that with it's a taxation area, and that's where this service partner of Tony's, a business called Avalara, specialise in providing that specific advice. So it's probably worth for a few £100 taking that advice from a taxation expert.
If anybody else has any particular question.
You won't thank me for this one, Tony, but what's the procedure for packaging material being returned UK to EU and vice versa?
I'm not going to thank you for that one. I'd say I covered this. I touched on this briefly on the importers webinar. Again, it's not an area that I've sort of pushing this back to the EU importer. So the EU company is providing this returnable packaging. You know, I'd be pushing if I was the UK company to say, so what's happening? So how are you? What's the procedure going to be? How are you going to control the movement of this packaging in and out of the UK? Because it's their packaging, and they really need to sort it, and they need to be instructing the UK company on how to handle it. But I'm happy to give a bit more advice on that. It's not a particular area I know an awful lot about. I think Rob knows a lot about the handling of return packaging either.
In a word, no. It's a question that's come up from a couple of clients. I've sought official advice on it, which has not yet been forthcoming. So it's not the best answer, but it's a question that's arising in automotive supply chains where you've got specialist stillages and the like. There are lots of people in our trade asking, and at the moment the answers are not forthcoming.
Yeah, there's been a couple of cases we've come across, and there's been a centralised pool of this return packaging, so it's going out to somebody else within the central UK that deals with all these places from coming in from Liverpool or from Coventry, and they're all put together in one place in the UK and dealt with locally there. So it might just be worth checking if that's the case as well. Presentations about 7.5 tons and over. Are these procedures for 3.5 ton vehicles as well? That they absolutely are. The only thing that's different is the Kent Access permit. So you don't need to apply for a Kent Access permit for any vehicles that are under 7.5 tons. But the paperwork, the export declarations, the transit declarations, the import declarations remain exactly the same.
Okay, if anyone else has a question, just unmute yourselves if you want, and just feel free to pose anything about the presentation, anything about the commercial invoice issue, if you've got full loads or express loads export, or anything in general. No one's got any questions.
I have another question, sorry. No one else has got one. And it's regarding samples. So if I'm sending my samples to manufacturing in Belgium, bringing into the UK, they're of zero value. So my commercial document is of zero value. But do I have to have a health certificate if it's a product of animal origin? Or will small samples shipped via the likes of DHL be handled differently?
I would expect, but I would need to check that you will still need, irrespective of quantity, the health certification. There are some, shall we say, low value, low weight exemptions. I don't know them off the top of my head. I would urgently check with DHL, because I know for sure for small limited quantities for health reasons that do, for example, less than 1 kilogram of certain product, then there are waivers on the full certification. But I would strongly advise you to go immediately and direct to DHL to ask them if it's a courier service you're using. I would start from the assumption you do need them, and anything beyond that is a bonus.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, one final question has just come in. With regard to advanced clearing, can you pre-clear the goods in Italy using your destination agents before they depart if you are routing through Dover-Calais and driving through France? So can we put a pre-lodged declaration into Italy? Yes, you still be using transit for this, Neil, if you want to unmute yourself, if you're there. I think that's the question. If we're going into Italy, we'll erase transit. Can we make a pre-lodged declaration in order to close that transit?
Well, you absolutely need.
Just to try and put it into real words, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, you just, if I understood it right, you can pre-clear the goods into the destination country. So if I've got a final delivery point of Italy, and I'm taking the Dover-Calais route, does by pre-clearing in Italy, does that eradicate the need for a transit bond through France?
No.
So there's no, in effect, there's no massive benefit to pre-clearing if you're going to need a transit bond anyway.
Rob, you got anything to add to that?
No, the only benefit in that scenario of pre-clearing or pre-preparing the declaration is when you arrived in Italy, you won't have the dwell time waiting for the broker to key enter and release your goods. So that would be the bonus of still prepping up your Italian pre-lodged entry, that your truck doesn't arrive during the night when your broker isn't working, for example. Yeah. And you've got 5 more hours to wait till he comes into the office, as a crude example.
As I mentioned in the presentation, once the transit is raised, there'll be a transit number, and that number needs to be communicated to the Italian importer, for example, who then need to communicate that to their customs agent to make the pre-lodged Italian clearance, and have to quote that transit number. So as Rob said, when that vehicle arrives at the government office in Milan of customs, the goods are the transit is discharged, and there'll be a transit number there that's discharged, and there'll be a pre-lodged in Italian import declaration with that transit number, and goods will automatically customs clear. It will be tripped. If the transit number isn't there, the goods will remain at the government customs office in Milan until the goods are customs cleared. And if that's the next day, the driver's waiting there 6 or 7 hours till the customs office opens and the customs broker sorted out. So I'd always say communicate the transit document straight away to the EU importer and make sure the pre-launch declaration includes that transit number.
Okay, so so going on that basis, we're sending a dedicated vehicle with you guys. Do going on that theory that they've got the transit number and it goes to a warehouse destination, is that still going to be the same process? Because under transit dock at the moment, you have to take it to the warehouse of destination, don't you? Or are you allowed to hold at the delivery point pending a remote clearance?
Well, if the delivery point is an authorised, consignee and is the office of destination for the transit document, then yeah, you can close transit and do the import make the import customs clearance at the site of delivery. Very few European delivery points are authorised to do that. So the driver, in 99.9% of the time, we're gonna have to send him to a government customs office to discharge his transit, and then for customs clearance to take place, to enter the goods into free circulation, to then be able to go and deliver. Anything to add, Rob?
No, that's pretty much it. Again, just to underline, with transit, you need to go to a customs approved location. That's either a government office or your end customer, but as Tony suggested, that's a limited number. So that's one certainly where a conversation with your destination broker or via Tony is important, that you're dispatching the load to somewhere. Under transit, it has to go to a customs or an approved location.
Yeah, for any of you that are on this meeting still that really want a better understanding of transit, it's going to be used an awful lot come the 1st of January. Our Brexit page on our website, there's a couple of pages there, very simple terms on how transit works. Anyone else like to unmute themselves and ask a question? If not...
Hi, Tony.
Hi, Paul.
We've got a customer who buys from a UK supplier. So they're a UK-based customer. They buy from their supplier in the UK and pay them in the UK. But the goods are actually shipped from the supplier's factory in Germany directly to my customer in the UK.
Yeah.
So going on that, I'm presuming the consignee would still be shown as the UK supplier, but the delivery point is my customer. So as they're the consignee and the shipping is all paid for them, would I be correct in saying that the responsibilities would lie with the UK supplier rather than my customer?
Back that one over to you, Rob.
Yeah, so the question you need to establish is, who is intending to be the importer of those goods? That's really the nub of it. So one of those parties there is the delivery point only. One of those parties has to be named as the importer. So that's your first question. Who is the importer of the goods? And the duties, taxes and import procedures will follow to the importer, and your end customer, depending on what arrangements you've got, would probably just be the delivery point. So I think the question I throw to you is, who do you intend to be the importer of the goods from a record keeping point of view? And,
so if importer of record is the UK supplier, then the onus is on them, and the customer is just a delivery point effectively.
Yeah. But just make sure all parties, so there'd be 3 parties involved in that, or maybe 4, the supplier, the importer and the delivery point in the UK, to make sure the documents reflect that very clearly. Otherwise, you do end up in a tangle, because you'll have import declarations done for your end customer, and that won't please them probably, if they're just already expecting to be the delivery point. So once you've established commercially who's the importer between the buyer and the seller, then just make sure the documents match that relationship. Otherwise, your broker is sort of working in the dark, and it gives room for mistakes on the import declaration.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Rob, there's just one last one, if I may. If the UK agrees to the EU proposal yesterday to leave everything for 6 months, does that mean the current rules apply, or are we going to go into a Brexit? declarations come first.
I saw something about this 6-month thing. I think that was regarding air freight ability to use airports and a few other things. But as far as goods on trucks moving, there is no 6 months. There is no implementation period. There's rumours that there might be an implementation period of free trade deals agreed on Sunday. But as we currently stand, everything changes on the 1st of January. There is no 6 months. The only 6-month issue is on imports, where you've got deferred declarations. But no, absolutely not. No, everything will change on the 1st of January.
That's all for now from the chat. If there's anybody else who has a question, or
great. Unless there's anyone else, shout out now or forever hold your peace. No, great. Okay, we'll get the recording done. If anybody wants to see it again, any points, and the slides will be sent over on Monday, hopefully. So thank you all very much for attending. And let's keep our fingers crossed for a free trade agreement. And you guys, as I said, just Brexit@globalfreight.com. Happy to help. Thank you again. Cheers. Bye-bye.